Blessed be y'all, this is Jen Fremont. I am going to talk today about the books of Robert A. Heinlein. I have been I'm struggling a bit to get through a quite long book, which is the last one in his Earth Chronicles series called Time Enough for Love. It's the memoirs of Lazarus Long, which is, he is, in this series, the oldest living human and also the ancestor of a good portion of the human race, about 500 years in the future. And in this part of the book, in this book anyway, he has been forcibly taken to be rejuvenated, and in this time they could rejuvenate somebody back to a youthful health, and they can have the appearance of whatever age they wish to be. In this time, some people want to be perpetually, look like they're 20. Others, they like being a little bit more mature, like 35, or even some that would prefer to be, more on the elderly, like 60 or 65, because they see people look at them with a lot more respect, and especially if their jobs are something in somewhere where respect and credibility and age are a plus. They would choose to look that chronological age anyway. I was the first time I remember hearing about these books and this author was in the context of a service that we had at the UU church that I used to belong to, and it was before I was doing any services, and they did one on the subject of polyamory, which is basically a romantic relationship between more than two people. It could be 3, 5, 10, whatever. And The Moon is a Harsh Mistress was the first one that I delved into. I got this Kindle like February before last, and I started doing the audio books because when I'm driving around, for a long time I would listen to music. Before that I listened to podcasts a lot, and the podcasts had gone by the wayside pretty much. And then I got into music for a while, and I have a hard time finding any music any new music that I like too well. So I got kind of bored with the music too. But I got back into audiobooks. I was into audiobooks a long time ago and used to get them from the library and stuff like that. But in this book, it's about a revolution on the moon, and it's not too far in the distant future. I think it's like 2525 or 2530 or something like that. If I remember correctly. It's been a while since I did the book, but I think it was written back in the 60s sometime. So, at that time they envisioned that there would be a lot more publicly known stuff on the moon. And the moon had been turned into pretty much a penal colony. People, were given the option to either go to jail or, get deported to the moon, where, they were free once they got there to the moon. But of course, they had to make their own way. And And because of the limited resources on the moon there, if they weren't pulling their weight, they were probably not going to survive very long, because the other folks there would see them as dead weight and would eliminate them. But this is a book about a revolution that started, and where they got their independence from the Earth. What it has in it is descriptions of different ways of having families. What they called group marriages and line marriages. And these were, larger clans of people that came together for a family and formed a family unit. And it was mostly, it was for the purposes of procreation, but also because they cared about each other. And they were much more open about, if you had sex outside of that family unit with anybody else. It was acceptable, but the main character there, the elder wife in the group marriage that he was in, she expected to be told in advance, that something was going to go on. Not that she objected to it, she just expected to be informed. That book doesn't delve quite as deep, I don't think, into things, but some of the other ones, the one I'm working on here is called Time Enough for Love. It is the memoirs of Lazarus Long, like I said. So there's several vignettes of different things. Like he talks about he married somebody who was a short liver, and they decided they were on a colony planet that was pretty much sounds like the Old West. They used a lot of animals for their cultivating and stuff like that. Interesting thing in there is they have very intelligent mules that actually, I guess they are genetically bred so that they can reproduce, and they are intelligent enough that they can speak, and they're more like a very intelligent dog that can speak and works for you. But anyway, he goes and him and his new wife go out and settle in this place in a new area and call it Happy Valley. And eventually other people come in there, and one of the things that he talks about is that they had no laws about marriage and about relationships and things like that. They let people do basically what they wanted to do and form the family units that they wanted to form. And I can see that to me that's a good structure. People, they ask me, well, are you for or against gay marriage? And I'm like, I do think that the state should have the right to even license marriage in the first place. I think that is a church matter. And if a specific church wants to license that sort of thing, that is their business. And as far as the legal contract, it should be treated as a legal contract and not differently than that. Some of the other things they talk about in his books are like contract marriages, which are how I understand hand fastings were in the olden times, that it was a contract. It was a business contract. It was usually a contract for procreation, to have a child and raise that child to a certain agreed upon age. At which time they could continue, if they got along, they could continue. That was not a problem, but legally they were not bound to after that point. And I can see that as a way of doing things. We've gotten so tied up with, the state licensing things and telling people how it must be and things like that. And like I said, I don't think it's any of the government's business. The business part of it can be the government's business if two individuals want to make a contract of some sort, to raise your children. Or it's pretty much about raising children and having a family unit, and having a business contract between those two people to do that. So these books have changed the way they have made me think. They have made me think a lot more than I had before about family relationships. I see why the government, this is my opinion anyway, why the government does not like polygamous relationships, and that would be because they grow a very large family unit that can be very formidable, can be an opposition to their authority. And I see that's why they do not want that, and they end up, standing on the supposed Judeo-Christian idea of one man and one woman, which, if you look in the Bible, many of the people had multiple wives in the Bible. So, anyway, that gets into a whole nother topic there. So, take a look at Robert A. Heinlein. The books I started with, The Moon is a Harsh Mistress. I went on to Stranger in a Strange Land. Then I went to Number of the Beast. I actually started reading The Number of the Beast when I was in junior high and never got finished with it. It gets very convoluted and complicated in trying to sort out what happened when, and we do not have the pronouns for time travel. Not the proper ones anyway. Anyway, I went on to Methuselah's Children and The Cat Who Walks Through Walls. And by the way, The Cat Who Walks Through Walls, just so you know, the cat doesn't show up until way into the book. The cat's much more prevalent in what's this other one? Can't read this. To Sail Beyond the Sunset. That's the Lazarus Long's mother's story. I also did another one that's not in the Earth Chronicles series called Glory Road, which is pretty cool too. It's a alternate dimensions and stuff like that. I still haven't gotten to Friday, or I've got one more on here. I Will Fear No Evil, but all but Glory Road, they all tie together, and they all have some characters in common. So all 5 of those tie together. Well, Moon is a Harsh Mistress. No, that doesn't really have the same characters. But if you don't do that one first, you don't understand some of the stuff it helps you understand some of the stuff in the other ones that I talked about, the Earth Chronicles series. So that's kind of my review of Robert A. Heinlein. Check him out. And if you like science fiction stuff that'll warp the hell out of your brain trying to figure out the right pronoun to use for time travel. And this is Jen Freeman. Blessed be y'all.